A United States Navy admiral has just resigned, and the reason why could unravel everything the Biden administration has been trying to hold together in the Middle East. We are not talking about a routine retirement. We are not talking about a planned transition. We are talking about a sudden departure from one of the most critical command positions in the entire U.S. military structure at a moment when the region is on the edge of something far bigger than most people realize. Welcome to Legal Lens USA. This is David Reynolds, and what you are about to hear will completely change how you understand what is really happening in the waters of the Middle East right now. Before we go any further, if you are new here, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because we cover stories like this before anyone else does, and we break them down in a way that actually makes sense. The admiral in question held command over naval operations that span one of the most strategically sensitive maritime theaters on the planet. This is the region where American aircraft carriers patrol waters that Iran has repeatedly declared it can strike. This is where Houthi forces in Yemen have been launching sophisticated anti-ship missiles at commercial vessels and military targets alike. This is where the delicate balance between American military presence and Iranian regional ambitions plays out every single day, in ways that could explode into direct conflict at any moment. And now, at this exact moment in history, the officer responsible for managing that balance has walked away. The timing alone should tell you something is deeply wrong. Admirals do not simply resign from critical combat commands during active regional conflicts unless something has fundamentally broken down. The official statements, as always, speak of personal reasons and planned transitions. But anyone who understands how the military actually works knows that senior officers, especially those commanding theater-level naval operations, do not leave their posts in the middle of a crisis unless the situation has become untenable. Either the strategic environment has deteriorated beyond what the command structure can manage, or the admiral has lost confidence in the mission itself, or decisions are being made at levels above his authority that he fundamentally cannot support. According to multiple defense analysts and former naval officers who have spoken to regional outlets and independent media, the resignation comes amid mounting frustration within the naval command structure over rules of engagement, resource allocation, and strategic coherence in the Middle East theater. The United States has been operating under enormous strain in these waters. American destroyers and cruisers have been firing interceptor missiles at incoming Houthi threats at a rate that has depleted stockpiles faster than they can be replenished. The cost calculations alone are staggering. Each SM-2 interceptor costs approximately $2 million. Each SM-6 interceptor costs approximately $4 million. And they have been firing these multi-million-dollar weapons at threats that cost a fraction of that amount to produce and launch. But the cost is not the real problem. The real problem is that the United States is being forced to play defense in a game where the offense holds almost every advantage. Iranian-aligned forces can choose when to strike, where to strike, and what weapons to use. American forces must maintain constant defensive posture, burning through resources and personnel readiness, while waiting for the next attack to come from a direction they cannot predict. That is not a sustainable military strategy. That is a slow-motion defeat dressed up as operational success. Now let's talk about what these Houthi forces are actually using, because understanding the weapon systems involved makes it clear why this situation has become so strategically untenable. The missiles being fired at American naval assets and commercial shipping are not primitive rockets cobbled together in basement workshops. These are sophisticated anti-ship cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that incorporate technology and design principles that could only have come from Iran. The systems include cruise missiles capable of sea-skimming flight profiles that make radar detection extremely difficult until the final moments before impact. They include ballistic missiles with maneuvering warheads that can adjust trajectory during terminal phase, making interception far more complicated than defending against traditional ballistic threats. The most concerning system currently being deployed is what Iranian sources and regional military analysts have identified as an advanced anti-ship ballistic missile variant, specifically designed to target moving naval vessels. Traditional ballistic missiles follow predictable arcs. You launch them, they rise, they fall, and sophisticated radar systems can track that entire flight path and calculate interception solutions. But these newer systems do something fundamentally different. They incorporate terminal guidance systems that allow the warhead to maneuver during the final descent phase. That means even if your radar tracks the missile through its boost phase and mid-course trajectory, once it enters terminal phase and begins maneuvering, all your previous interception calculations become obsolete. Think about it this way. Imagine you are trying to catch a ball that someone throws in a perfect arc. You can watch the trajectory, position yourself, and catch it because the path is predictable. Now imagine that same ball can suddenly change direction 3 times during the final second before it reaches you. Your ability to intercept it drops dramatically because your positioning was based on a trajectory that no longer applies. That is what American naval commanders are facing in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden right now. They are defending against weapons that can change the rules of engagement in the final moments, when interception becomes most critical. Iranian military officials and technical documentation that has circulated through regional defense analysis channels describe these systems as incorporating optical guidance, radar terminal guidance, and potentially satellite communication links that allow real-time course correction based on target movement. What that means in plain English is this: the missile can see the ship, it can track the ship's movement, and it can adjust its flight path to compensate for any evasive maneuvers the ship attempts during those final, critical seconds. You cannot simply change course and expect the missile to sail past you anymore. It will follow you. It will adjust. And unless your defensive systems can physically intercept and destroy that warhead before impact, it will hit you. The technical complexity of building such a system cannot be overstated. You need heat-resistant materials that can survive the extreme temperatures of hypersonic atmospheric re-entry. You need guidance systems that continue functioning despite the plasma sheath that forms around objects traveling at those speeds. You need control surfaces or thruster systems capable of generating maneuvers while the missile is experiencing forces that would tear apart conventional designs. And you need all of this to work reliably in combat conditions, against targets that are actively trying to evade and defend themselves. The fact that Houthi forces are successfully deploying these systems means they are receiving not just weapons, but sophisticated technical support and operational training that only a state-level military power could provide. According to Iranian state media and statements from Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps officials, these weapon systems represent a fundamental shift in the regional balance of power. Iranian sources have openly stated that American naval vessels operating in the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and adjacent waters are now within range of weapons that cannot be reliably intercepted by current American defensive systems. And here is where the story gets truly concerning. It was not an Iranian general who confirmed that these weapons pose an existential threat to American naval operations. It was analysis from American defense contractors and statements from naval officers speaking anonymously to military publication outlets that have acknowledged the same basic reality. Multiple reports from defense industry sources and former naval commanders have described the current defensive posture as unsustainable. One former destroyer captain speaking to defense analysts described the situation as trying to defend against a heavyweight boxer while your hands are tied behind your back. You might be able to dodge a few punches. You might even land a counterstrike if you get lucky. But you are not going to win that fight under those conditions. And eventually, something is going to get through. That is the reality American naval forces are operating under right now in the Middle East. They are in a defensive posture against an adversary that can strike whenever it chooses, using weapons that are specifically designed to defeat the defensive systems those ships carry. Let that sink in for a moment. The United States Navy, the most powerful maritime force ever assembled in human history, with aircraft carriers that cost $13 billion each and destroyers equipped with the most advanced radar and missile systems ever developed, is being forced into a defensive crouch by an irregular force using Iranian-supplied weapons that cost a tiny fraction of what the defensive systems cost to operate. and the officer who was responsible for managing that impossible situation has just resigned. So where does this leave American strategy in the Middle East? It leaves it in a state of fundamental crisis that the mainstream media outlets are barely covering, and that the Biden administration is desperately trying to manage without admitting the scope of the problem. The entire premise of American military presence in the region for the past several decades has been that overwhelming technological superiority and force projection capability would deter adversaries from direct confrontation. Aircraft carriers were supposed to be floating symbols of untouchable American power. Destroyers bristling with advanced weapons systems were supposed to create protective bubbles that no enemy could penetrate. And the credibility of American deterrence was supposed to prevent situations from ever escalating to the point where those assumptions would be tested. Every single one of those assumptions is being challenged right now. Iran has demonstrated that it can supply irregular forces with weapons sophisticated enough to threaten American naval assets. Houthi forces have demonstrated that they are willing to actually use those weapons, despite the risk of American retaliation. And American defensive systems have demonstrated that they cannot maintain indefinite protection against sustained attacks without depleting resources faster than they can be replaced. What does this mean strategically? This is where the story goes from concerning to genuinely alarming. Implementing new defensive systems capable of addressing these advanced anti-ship threats could take years and cost tens of billions of dollars. The current Aegis combat system and associated interceptor missiles were designed for a different threat environment. They were optimized for defending against aircraft and traditional ballistic missiles, following predictable trajectories. Adapting them to handle maneuvering hypersonic threats and advanced cruise missiles requires fundamental system upgrades, new interceptor designs, and potentially entirely new defensive concepts that have not even been fully developed yet. And in the meantime, every American naval vessel operating in the Middle East theater exists under a threat umbrella that commanders know they cannot fully defend against. You cannot solve this problem overnight. You cannot rush the engineering. And while the Pentagon works on solutions that may or may not arrive in time, every aircraft carrier, every destroyer, every support vessel in the region operates with the knowledge that the defensive systems they rely on may not be adequate against the threats they face. That changes everything about how naval commanders make decisions. That changes risk calculations for every operation. That changes the fundamental credibility of American power projection in a region where credibility is the only thing preventing limited conflicts from exploding into regional war. The implications extend far beyond just the immediate tactical situation in the Red Sea or the Persian Gulf. American military credibility worldwide rests on the assumption that the United States can deploy forces anywhere and establish operational superiority that adversaries cannot challenge. If Iranian-supplied weapons operated by irregular forces can effectively challenge American naval operations, what does that signal to China watching Taiwan? What does that signal to Russia watching NATO expansion? What does that signal to every regional power that has been deterred from action by the assumption that American military response would be overwhelming and unstoppable? The answer is that it signals vulnerability. It signals that asymmetric strategies using relatively inexpensive weapons can impose costs and constraints on American operations that undermine the entire logic of force projection. It signals that the era of unchallenged American military dominance may be ending not through peer competitor development of equivalent carrier strike groups and air forces, but through distributed systems of relatively cheap precision weapons that can threaten American assets faster than they can be defended against. Iranian officials and regional analysis outlets have been stating this explicitly for months now. According to statements from Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commanders and Iranian Defense Ministry sources, the strategy is not to build a navy that can challenge American carriers in open water combat. The strategy is to make the waters where those carriers operate so dangerous and costly to defend that the carriers lose their strategic value. If it costs $4 million to intercept a missile that cost $50,000 to build and launch, and if the attacking force can launch those missiles faster than the defending force can replenish interceptors, then the economic calculus favors the attacker, regardless of who has more total resources. And here is where it gets even more complicated. According to multiple defense analysts and former Pentagon officials speaking to independent outlets, part of the frustration within the naval command structure stems from rules of engagement that prevent American forces from striking at the source of these attacks with the kind of overwhelming force that might actually deter future strikes. The Biden administration has been attempting to calibrate responses that punish Houthi attacks without escalating into broader regional conflict with Iran. That means limited strikes against selected targets, rather than comprehensive campaigns to destroy launch capabilities. And from the perspective of naval commanders whose ships are being targeted, those limited responses are not working. The attacks continue. The resource depletion continues. And the strategic situation continues deteriorating. Now let's acknowledge that there are conflicting narratives about exactly why this admiral resigned and what it means for American strategy. According to official Pentagon statements and administration spokespeople, the resignation was a personal decision unrelated to strategic disagreements or operational frustrations. The official line emphasizes that command transitions are routine, that the mission continues unaffected, and that there is no crisis in naval operations or strategic planning for the Middle East theater. Multiple administration officials have stated that American forces remain fully capable of defending themselves and commercial shipping, that interceptor stockpiles are being managed appropriately, and that no fundamental change in posture or strategy is required. For many observers, those official reassurances ring hollow, given the timing and circumstances. The mere fact that a senior naval commander has left a critical post during an active operational crisis raises questions regardless of what official statements claim. The conflicting narratives between official optimism and the reality of resource depletion and sustained attacks create an atmosphere of uncertainty about what is actually happening and what the administration's genuine assessment of the situation really is. In the absence of complete transparency about the operational challenges and strategic constraints American forces face, the truth of why this admiral resigned remains contested, but the implications of his departure are undeniable. Whether further developments will clarify the exact reasons or reveal additional command departures remains to be seen. But the story of this resignation has already captured attention from everyone watching the slow-motion unraveling of American strategic positioning in the Middle East. It represents one more data point in a pattern of developments that all point in the same concerning direction. American military power is being challenged in ways that expose fundamental vulnerabilities in how that power is structured and deployed. And the officers responsible for managing those challenges in real time appear to be reaching conclusions that they cannot state publicly, but that inform decisions like sudden resignations from critical commands. So where does this leave us? It leaves us at a moment where one admiral's resignation reveals far more about the state of American military operations in the Middle East than any official briefing or press conference ever could. It leaves us understanding that the defensive posture American naval forces have been forced to maintain is strategically untenable and economically unsustainable. It leaves us recognizing that Iranian-supplied weapon systems have fundamentally changed the threat environment in ways that American defensive systems were not designed to handle, and cannot fully address without years of development and billions of dollars in investment. And it leaves us with the uncomfortable reality that the Biden administration's Middle East strategy may be collapsing under the weight of contradictions it can neither solve nor openly acknowledge. This is a story that is still developing, and Legal Lens USA will keep you updated as new information emerges. If this video helped you understand what is really happening behind the headlines and the official statements, please share it with someone who needs to see it, and drop a comment below. If you are watching this and you understand what this admiral's resignation really signals about the state of American naval operations and Middle East strategy, then hit that like button right now and make sure you are subscribed, because this situation is not getting better and we will be covering every development as it unfolds. Do you think the Biden administration has a credible strategy for sustaining American naval operations in the Middle East under these conditions? Or is this Admiral's resignation the beginning of a broader collapse in command confidence? Let us know what you think, because this conversation matters, and your perspective matters. This is what one resignation reveals when you actually examine the strategic context and operational reality behind it. Every defense analyst, every former naval officer, every Pentagon planner is now absorbing what this means. The answers are not clear yet. The administration's response is not defined yet. But the question has been asked loudly through one admiral's decision to walk away from a command that has become impossible to execute successfully under current constraints and strategic direction.